Welcome to Exploration and Analysis. In this series, we will be looking at different counties around America and exploring them. We're going to be starting with San Mateo County, California. Along with Santa Cruz and Monterey, which I hope to explore in later videos, San Mateo is a part of California that I've visited many times throughout my life, from my early childhood up until pretty recently. So I've got new experience in different stages of my life in different time periods, and it's a part of California that's near and dear to my heart. I love going there, and thought it would be a good place to start this series with. And San Mateo County is where San Francisco Airport is located. So it's usually the first county in California that I see upon going there, because usually I fly into San Francisco Airport. So I thought that would be a pretty good place to start. And it's these three counties, San Mateo, Santa Cruz, Monterey. There is a ton to do there. There's a lot to look at, a lot to dissect, a lot of natural beauty. So I thought it would be a good place to talk about and to share some of my experiences. Let me talk a little bit about the weather, because I think the weather in this part of California is fantastic. It never gets particularly hot or particularly cold. It stays kind of mild and temperate, which is just how I like it pretty much all year. And I've been there in the summer, I've been there in the winter, so pretty mild weather. That being said, there are microclimates within this area, so you can get to some particular sections where it may get a little bit warmer, and some sections where it gets a little cooler, some parts where it's maybe a little bit drier, other places where it's a little bit more misty, and I'll be explaining that a little bit as I go. But I think that it is just generally a place where the weather is nice throughout the entire year. So coming from the Northeast, and I've lived in upstate New York, I've lived in Vermont, where the weather can be very extreme and uncomfortable, okay? Very cold winters, very snowy winters, and then very hot and stifling summers as well. So it is, for me, I think, a good time to go to California, at least this part of California, is when the weather is least nice where I'm living, and the weather is always usually mild and very comfortable in San Mateo County, as well as Santa Cruz and Monterey as well. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff to look at in this part of California, and I'll be sharing some of the different photos that I have, both from my roadside trips where I'm driving up and down Highway 1 and other highways that, just offer very stunning, breathtaking views, but also some great places to hike and to appreciate the scenery from there. And we'll talk a little bit about some celebrities that have some ties to San Mateo County. First, Keith Hernandez, pictured there on the left. We have two different pictures of him there, one when he was younger in the 1980s, one is after his retirement. So Keith Hernandez grew up in Pacifica, and I did get his autobiography on audiobook, which he read, and it was very enjoyable. And he talked a little bit about his childhood growing up in Pacifica and how his father was his baseball coach. So kind of interesting life. And that kind of talks a little bit too about how that community changed a little bit over time, and how San Mateo County in general changed over time. So a good book to read, and it kind of gives you at least a little bit of a glimpse into San Mateo County as Keith was growing up. And then we see Chris Christopherson there, and he's a famous musician, actor, kind of a Renaissance man, and he moved all over the place as he was growing up. So he really wasn't tied to any one place in particular for too long, but he did graduate from San Mateo County, San Mateo High School. So that is a important claim to fame for that high school. And another graduate of San Mateo High School was Alicia Silverstone, and she grew up in nearby Hillsborough, which is in San Mateo County. So she is another person that has roots in that community and graduated from San Mateo High School. So this is a map of San Mateo County, and you can see there's water on both sides. To the east of the San Mateo County, we see San Francisco Bay, and to the west, of course, is the Pacific Ocean. So the airport is located kind of close to the bay, and I'm not sure if you can tell on this map, but there's a kind of lavender little area by San Bruno. That's kind of where the airport is. So that's usually where I would land myself. And you can see kind of along San Francisco Bay Bay there. There's some highways there, Highway 101 being a pretty major road there. There's a lot of suburbanization there, a lot of shops, strip malls, a lot of hotels. So it's kind of got a very suburban kind of atmosphere. But as you get away from the bay and more towards the middle part, you get a lot of canyons, and you start to get into some mountains. And you'd be surprised how sparsely populated it is as you start getting to that area in between the bay and the coast, and even along the coast itself. So usually when I get into this area after getting into the airport, I can't wait to sort of get kind of away from the bay and either towards the coast. And again, being from the interior Northeast, I don't get to see the ocean a lot. So I usually like to be on the ocean, but there's also a lot of beautiful stuff in between the bay and the ocean that is kind of worth exploring as well. But very often I like to get to Highway 1, where I really feel like that is just a nice scenic road to drive along, especially in the part that goes through San Mateo County. Highway 1 is a route that runs parallel to the Pacific Ocean and pretty much north and south. And for a lot of it, you can kind of see good views of the Pacific Ocean. Um, and it is a road trip destination. It has been throughout history, throughout the mid 20th century, and maybe in the early 20th century. It was used as a way for people from Southern California to kind of get out and see some of the nicer weather in Northern California. So it has that kind of mid-century kind of road trip vibe to it, which I really like, as well as, like I said, a lot of views from the ocean, which I don't get a chance to see too much of where I'm from. So I always very much appreciate it. And if you are familiar maybe with the Atlantic Ocean, but not the Pacific can be a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more active. So it is kind of a different vibe than the Atlantic Ocean. And I think driving along Highway 1, you really got to get that feel. One of the things that you'll see a lot of in this area is this contrast between higher elevation, very rocky terrain, and the water and the ocean. And I think this picture kind of encapsulates that. You see the very vibrant, very lively ocean kind of crashing against the rocky cliffs. And this view is a kind of typical view along Highway 1. And I think that is really why I like driving on this road so much, and why I want to get to that road as quickly as possible. Just kind of driving up and down Highway 1 and seeing this kind of scenery. It's just a very nice, very pleasant thing, and I think that this picture kind of gives you a sort of sense of that. You also see a fair amount of wildlife and quite a lot of birds, as this picture kind of shows you there. In fact, the movie The Birds took place in a coastal community off of Highway 1, although not in San Mateo County, but not terribly far. It was actually took place a little bit to the north, but you kind of get a sense of how it might have been inspired by scenes like this. You just see a lot of pretty birds as you look across and see the waves in the background as you're driving along Highway 1. I want to talk a little bit about some of the colors that you see, because I do kind of get the impression that just there's a different vibe in this part of California versus, say, the Northeast, where I'm from, as far as what colors you tend to find. In the Northeast, except for the fall, but in most of the year, you see a lot of green. There's a lot of trees. They tend to be similar colors, and there's kind of greenery everywhere. Whereas when you go to California, there are patches of sort of beige and sort of light brown, which are just kind of just have a little bit of a different look than what you might see in the Northeast. So though when you get to the coast, you start to see different colors as well. And here we sort of get to see some wildflowers that kind of have some nice orange colors, which, I think are very beautiful indeed. The other thing you'll see is seaweed that kind of gets washed up along the shoreline, which I think has a certain charm to it. And then, of course, you see the different colors of the rocks and stuff. And I think that can look rather nice as well. And this slide here pays a little bit of homage to another YouTuber who does a series called Control City Freak. And what that YouTuber does is he does videos about signs like this, signs that tell you how far different cities are. And I've always had a particular fascination with those signs, and I thought I was the only one. So when I saw that somebody had an entire YouTube series based on these signs, I kind of, it kind of hit me. But yes, as we see these pictures were taken off of Highway 1 in the more southern part of San Mateo County. So the one on the left is facing south. Davenport and Santa Cruz and Watsonville are all in Santa Cruz County, but on the right we see the signs facing north as Pescadero and Half Moon Bay are in the San Mateo County. Pescadero is a nice, cute little hamlet. It kind of has another kind of a Western kind of road trippy vibe, which is very nice in its own right. And then Half Moon Bay, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about in the later slides. So San Mateo County has a couple of these lighthouse hostels along the coast here, and one of these is pictured here, Montera Lighthouse. And I have stayed here quite a few times. I've stayed at some of the other lighthouses along the coast here too. So they're very nice places to stay. You can get a really inexpensive bunk bed where you can kind of sleep in a common area with other people, or you can pay more and get your own room. I think the individual room is around $150, which is a little bit more expensive than what I would normally pay for a hotel room. But I think you pay a little bit more, but you do get something rather nice. And I'm going to show you some later pictures that I think maybe drive home, I think, why I'm willing to kind of pay a little bit more than I normally would for a hotel room that's as nice as some of these. But as you can see, it's an old lighthouse and it's right on the ocean, and they've got like these little hotel rooms there. There's common areas, there's picnic tables, there's places where you can walk, all around there. There's different signs that tell you a little bit about the history of the lighthouse. So it's a nice place to spend a night, and it's usually something I like to do, if not on my first night in California, usually by my second and third night. So this is the picture from my hotel room in the Montera Lighthouse in San Mateo County. And I think this kind of can give you a sense of why I might be willing to pay a little bit more to stay at a place like this, to kind of look out your window in the morning and see a sight like this. Again, for somebody who doesn't get to see the ocean much, this is particularly beautiful, particularly breathtaking. And you can open up the window and breathe in that fresh air, and the air does feel very nice indeed, coming off the ocean, especially in the morning. And you see the road, the water there hitting in the rocky shoreline. Now I don't know if you can tell from this picture, but the hotel where I'm taking the picture from is on a little bit of a higher level, and the ocean is a little bit lower. So there's kind of a trail kind of behind that fence that you can take it down. You can kind of see a little bit of a sandy area right before you get to the ocean there. So there is actually a little bit of a beach that you can walk to from the hotel area and kind of take a quick dip in the water if you want. Or I saw somebody there last time I was there kind of playing with their dog, and it's just a very nice place to take a dog, I think. So so I got a chance to do a little bit of fetch with the dog, but again, certainly a nice thing to look at from your hotel room. And when you're kind of getting up in the morning and just kind of like being able to walk around there, it's very pleasant indeed. Here's a couple of other views from the property of the lighthouse. The one on the left kind of faces southwest towards the ocean, and you can see that and how it looks on kind of a clear day. And then the one on the right kind of faces northwest, which is pretty much the same direction as the one from the hotel room. So the building to the right on that picture there is the room where the hotel room was. So you can kind of picture where I was taking that picture from, and then if you moved a little bit leftward, this is where this picture would be, and it's kind of rising right above that beach I was talking about before. I think what that picture on the right really encapsulates is that kind of misty ambiance that you get in a lot of mornings in this part of California, and it really is something that I find very pleasant. The kind of misty, kind of little bit cool mornings where you feel like you need to wear a sweater, but it's not really that cold. It's just very pleasantly chilly, and I kind of like that. But it often warms up a little bit later in the day, and I think the picture on the left probably was taken more in like the afternoon when the skies start to clear and it starts to get a little bit sunnier and warm up a bit. There's another lighthouse hostel a little bit further south from Montero Lighthouse, and that's the Pescadero Lighthouse. So these are a couple of pictures of that lighthouse. The one on the left is a little bit closer to where the lighthouse is, and the picture on the right is a little bit more in the distance. So you get a couple of pictures of this lighthouse where you can also stay. And I have stayed there as well. There's also a sort of a group room where you can get bunk beds as well as individual rooms. And again, you kind of get a sense of a clearer day on the left, and then the sort of foggier morning on the right, with those waves kind of crashing against the cliffs there. Half Moon Bay is a small city that's on the coast of California off of Highway 1. And so it's a sort of, I would say it's a city, 12,000 people, so it's large enough where you can get some amenities. There's some good places to eat there, some good coffee, some good bakeries, and so you can get a little bit of a break from the quieter kind of wildlife stuff, and being more of a small city, I guess. And the downtown of this is east of Highway 1, so the ocean is on west of Highway 1. So coming from the Northeast, I'm used to a lot of old buildings. So I tend to, when I go to California, notice that there's not as many of them. There's a lot more newer buildings, but every once in a while you can come across some nice historic buildings. And this jail here, built in 1919, is something that you will see a little bit here and there in California. And it kind of has that kind of Wild West kind of vibe to it. Sometimes I think we may forget that California was a Western state, and in its early history, it was kind of like a Wild West kind of place before it got modernized as we got into the 20th century, especially in the middle part of the 20th century. Half Moon Bay, like a lot of communities in this part of California, has some really good Mexican food. The Mexican food, it's sort of a little bit like Tex-Mex, but it's got a kind of California flavor to it. Maybe you call it Cali-Mex or Mexicali, but it's really good, and kind of affordable food. Very tasty, very good flavors. So I think what's maybe a little bit different than the California version of Mexican food as opposed to the Texas or Mexican food is that in California you see a lot more avocado used, a lot more Monterey Jack cheese that I think melts really well with, and it goes well, I think, with some of the other ingredients. They also will have these kind of salsa bars, at least the good taquerias do. Salsa bars where you can get a variety of different kinds of salsa, maybe 4 or 5, as well as other kinds of condiments and toppings that you can put on your food. And you can just help yourself to those things free of charge. And I really kind of appreciate those. So, I find when I'm in California, visiting a lot of these taquerias, you can get a lot, good bang for your buck by eating at them. And the Half Moon Bay's taqueria is no exception. But, there's many good ones throughout not only San Mateo County, but Santa Cruz and Monterey as well. And then to the right, we see kind of an old school style church, something that, wouldn't look out of place if it was in New England somewhere. So this, I think, church was kind of probably built by New Englanders. And, and sometimes in California, you do see some of these old buildings that do kind of have a kind of vibe, like something that wouldn't be out of place in the eastern part of the United States. And as we get away from the ocean, we get to a lot of good forest land, a lot of good mountain land with some very good hiking that you can do. And I've spent a fair amount of time in some of these state parks, and particularly in Purisima Creek Preserve and Butano State Park. So a lot of the pictures I'm going to be showing are going to be from that area. And you can get a sense even from this picture just how large some of these trees are. You can kind of see these signs in the foreground and the way the trees just kind of tower over them. And I think that the impact of these kind of large trees is what, I think can be rather startling to somebody who's not used to that kind of sight. So redwood forests are something very special. The trees are just have a towering kind of presence, and they can be rather breathtaking. It makes your hike feel like you're in a kind of magical place. So the air in these redwood forests are usually kind of cool and damp and misty, and that also adds to that kind of ambiance, that kind of magical kind of ambiance. And I think that there's just nothing like kind of doing a hike in a redwood forest. So here you can see the bottom part of a redwood tree, and I could probably, that kind of that kind of carving here within the tree, I could probably walk into that. The top part of that is probably about 6 feet high, so that can give you a sense of just how big these trees are. Here are some more photos. I think these were all taken from Butano State Park, although a couple of them might have been also from Purisima Creek Preserve. I kind of get those two confused, and I'm sorry I didn't label all my pictures, but I think most of these are from Butano State Park. But you can kind of get a sense here of what some of the different scenery is like, and how it changes somewhat as you move along. Here's a side trail in Butano State Park that actually kind of goes underneath this kind of shrubbery. So when you're going into this trail, you're basically going underneath all of these kinds of vines and branches and stuff that are kind of above you. It kind of has a kind of a surreal kind of experience, and a different kind of magical kind of feeling than what the redwood forests have. And I think these pictures kind of show you the contrast of the different scenery. On the left, you see these sort of huge, kind of towering trees that some parts of your hike will have. But on the right, you'll see a different kind of terrain, and these can be on the same hike, on the same trail, very short. Maybe one is on one side of the mountain, and then you get to the peak, and then when you walk over to the other side of the mountain, the terrain will look very different, more like what's on the right, where you see something more drier, more of a badlandy kind of atmosphere here with a lot of the beige color. Not nearly as many trees, but you do see some. So I think that is something that can be rather riveting about hiking through these kind of California parks and things, is just how much the terrain kind of changes as you move from microclimate to microclimate. And sometimes it can be a very short distance. Just on one hike, you can get this wild kind of contrast. A few more photos here. We see some slugs, which is something that you'll see a lot of on these hikes in San Mateo County. You also get on the right here a different kind of terrain where it's somewhere in between. It's not as arid as the earlier picture, but you're starting to see a little bit of, you know, they're not quite as forested as other areas too. So a lot of contrast, a lot of variety, and I think that this kind of hits home as well. All right, so I think that that's going to kind of wrap up my look at San Mateo County. And as you can see, I am kind of focusing on the positive here. I do think that when one travels, it's always a good idea to try to, try to find nice things that you can enjoy, and then when you go back, go back and see those things again, and just try to make the most of your time whenever you're exploring a new place. And we could be spending a video like this, tearing apart a community or some of the different places, but I'll maybe save those harsher critiques for maybe later videos. I focus for this county series on some of the nicer features of the counties that we're going to be looking at. So like I said, I'm going to hope to do some more of these California counties, but we'll also do counties in other part of the country as well.